I never believed in cursed objects. Growing up, my grandmother used to terrify me with stories about things that held pieces of the dead, the hair woven into dolls, fingernails burned into candles, teeth stored in jars beneath floorboards. She used to say that a person never truly leaves behind what they shed, that the body was only pretending to let go. I used to laugh at her. Teeth especially. What could be less sinister than an old tooth? Kids lose them all the time. Dentists pull them out like nothing. They're just calcium, hollow, white, harmless. That was before I found the tooth in the cabinet. It started in May of last year. I just moved into a narrow one-bedroom apartment above an antique shop. The rent was cheap because the landlord was desperate. The store beneath me was shuttered half the week, and the neighborhood itself had that brittle, forgotten feel, empty sidewalks, peeling paint on every window frame, and a faint smell of mildew that never quite lifted, even when it rained. The apartment itself wasn't much better. It was old, creaking, with uneven floors that sloped toward the center, but the strangest part was the built-in cabinet in the kitchen. It was a tall, narrow thing that stretched all the way up to the ceiling, its drawers stiff from decades of swelling and shrinking wood. It had no lock, no handles, just a flat face of faded white paint and iron hinges. The landlord had warned me about it the day I signed the lease. "Don't bother with that cabinet," he said with a dismissive wave. "It's swollen shut. Been that way for years. Tenants leave it alone." I nodded, not thinking much of it. In fact, the more he told me to leave it alone, the more I wanted to pry it open. The first few nights in the apartment were restless. The place seemed to breathe strangely in the dark. I'd hear faint groans from the walls, like something adjusting itself when the temperature dropped. But what kept pulling me out of sleep was the cabinet. Not noise exactly. Not at first. Just a sense of presence. My bed was in the room directly adjacent to the kitchen, and when I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, my eyes would always snap toward that wall, the one where the cabinet stood on the other side. One night, though, there was noise. A faint rattling, like something small shifting inside would. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, listening. It stopped. The next night, it happened again. Louder this time. A tiny knock, then a scrape like fingernails or teeth dragged against the inside of a drawer. By the end of that week, I couldn't take it anymore. I went into the kitchen in the morning and examined the damn cabinet. The paint was chipped. The bottom drawer had a long crack running through the wood, wide enough that I could see the faintest sliver of darkness inside. That was when I smelled it. Not rot exactly. Not mold. Something sour, like old saliva dried on metal. I tried to force the drawer open. At first it wouldn't budge, but with enough pressure, bracing my knee against the frame, tugging with all my weight, it finally cracked apart. Dust and wood splinters rained down. The inside of the drawer smelled like copper pennies and damp rags. And sitting in the center, perfectly placed on the warped wood bottom, was a tooth. Just one. It wasn't yellow like you'd expect. It was gray, almost translucent, like the enamel had been eaten away. There were grooves on it, tiny ridges I couldn't explain. It was large enough to be an adult molar, but longer, more tapered, like it had grown differently from any normal tooth I'd ever seen. I picked it up, and immediately something felt wrong. It was warm, not from the sun, not from the air. This was body warm, like it had just been pulled from a mouth. I nearly dropped it, but my fingers locked around it involuntarily, holding it tight. For a split second, I thought I heard something, a faint, almost imperceptible hum in my ears, like the sound of someone whispering underwater. That night, the rattling in the cabinet stopped, but something else began. The first time it happened, I was half asleep, sprawled on my bed with the window cracked open for air. The sound drifted in slowly, so soft I thought it was my breathing echoing strangely in the dark. Then it rose. A faint note, not a whistle, not a hum. Singing. It was high-pitched, delicate, like a child's voice, except it didn't form words. Just long, wavering tones, rising and falling like someone practicing scales. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the kitchen. I crept to the doorway and froze. The apartment was completely still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. But the singing hadn't stopped. It was softer now, almost buried under the silence. It was coming from the cabinet, from the open drawer, from the tooth. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream, a half-waking hallucination brought on by stress and the strangeness of moving into a new place. But I couldn't shake the unease. Every time I walked through the kitchen, my eyes went straight to the tooth, sitting in the drawer like it was waiting for me. The longer I looked at it, the more I swore I saw tiny fractures spidering across its surface, forming patterns. The third night it sang again, louder. I woke to it immediately. The sound didn't drift in this time. It was already there, as if it had been going on for hours. The same trembling notes, bending in and out of tune, but more insistent. And this time, it stopped the second I sat up. Like it knew I was listening, I decided to get rid of it. I wrapped the tooth in paper towels, shoved it into a plastic bag, and dropped it in the dumpster behind the building. When I let go of it, I swear the hum spiked for half a second, like a scream caught inside my skull. That night, I finally slept, or at least I thought I did. At 3:07 a.m., I woke to the sound of the drawer sliding open in the kitchen. Not rattling, not scraping, sliding. I froze, unable to move, listening as the air filled with faint, rhythmic notes. The singing had returned. I stayed in bed until the sun came up, too afraid to even breathe loudly. When I finally gathered the courage to look in the kitchen, the cabinet drawer was open wider than before, and sitting in the exact same spot inside was the tooth. That was when I stopped pretending this was stress or exhaustion. Something was happening, something real. I tried to ignore it, but the singing grew bolder each night. Sometimes it layered on itself, like two voices humming in opposite tones. Sometimes it slowed, dragging notes out until they cracked and broke into low growls. I started noticing other things, too. Shadows in the corner of the room that bent unnaturally, like someone standing just beyond the reach of the light. Faint, wet sounds in the silence, like lips smacking together. And once, when I passed the kitchen on my way to the bathroom, I caught the faintest movement in the drawer. The tooth was rocking, back and forth, like it was keeping time to the song. I stopped sleeping. Coffee kept me upright during the day, but at night, I couldn't keep my eyes off the kitchen. My body refused to rest when I knew it was in there, waiting. I thought about calling the landlord, but what would I say? Your cabinet is haunted by a singing tooth? He'd laugh in my face. No, I had to deal with it myself. The breaking point came one night at 4 a.m. when the singing grew so loud it drowned out every other sound in the apartment. My ears rang with it, like my skull was vibrating. I stumbled into the kitchen, ready to rip the drawer out entirely, and froze. The tooth wasn't in the drawer anymore. It was on the counter, sitting perfectly upright, waiting. And for the first time, I realized the song wasn't just random notes. It was calling my name. I thought it would stop after that first night. When I woke the next morning, I convinced myself the sound I had heard, the faint, humming tune vibrating from behind the cabinet door, was nothing more than exhaustion, a trick of my tired brain mixed with the faint ringing in my ears I sometimes got after stressful days. The cabinet was closed, silent, just a piece of furniture like any other. I almost laughed at myself for feeling afraid. Almost. Because even though the sunlight came in, washing the room with warmth, there was an unease clinging to the corners of the space, as though something had been left behind after the night faded. Something that didn't belong to the daylight. I went about my day with a determination to ignore it. I cleaned the living room, forced myself to work, even walked outside just to breathe fresh air. But when I came back inside, I caught myself glancing toward the cabinet. The longer I avoided opening it, the heavier the curiosity and the dread grew. By late afternoon, I gave in. I remember pulling open the cabinet door slowly, as if I expected something to leap out. Of course, nothing did. It was just as it had been when I bought the thing from that thrift store. A few shelves, some old nails sticking out, a faint smell of wood polish mixed with something more bitter I couldn't place. But then I noticed it. In the back corner of the lower shelf, pressed against the wood grain, was a single object I had somehow overlooked when I moved the cabinet in. At first, I thought it was just a chip of porcelain. White, smooth, irregular. But when I picked it up between my fingers, I froze. It was a tooth. Not fake. Not plastic. Not decorative. A real human tooth. I could see the root, slightly yellowed, one side worn down, a faint chip on the enamel. Holding it made my stomach churn. I dropped on the counter and washed my hands 3 times, though I couldn't wash away the crawling feeling spreading up my skin. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had fallen between cracks in a drawer at the thrift store and ended up inside the cabinet. Maybe it was some strange accident. Still, it bothered me enough that I didn't put it back. I slipped the tooth into a small plastic bag and tossed it into the kitchen trash. That should have been the end of it. But that night, the sound returned. It wasn't humming this time. It was clearer, sharper, as if whatever was behind the cabinet door was growing bolder. A thin, reedy voice. Not quite a melody, not quite words. Just fragments of sound strung together like someone trying to remember a song they'd forgotten. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening as the noise drifted through the walls. The pitch rose and fell, too deliberate to be creaks of wood or pipes. There was rhythm, and something almost like a human voice, warped and strained, echoing faintly through the hall. I thought of the tooth in the trash. I thought of the way it had sat in my palm, cold and small, like a piece of something that had been alive once, but wasn't anymore. I thought of the note of bitterness in the cabinet's smell. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I woke groggy, my head pounding from lack of rest. I went to take out the trash, eager to be rid of the bag with the tooth inside. But when I opened the bin outside, I stopped dead. The trash bag was there, torn open. The rest of the garbage spilled out across the driveway. And sitting neatly on top, as though placed there intentionally, was the tooth. Clean, white, gleaming faintly in the morning sun. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped. My mouth went dry, and I swear I could feel every one of my own teeth inside my jaw. Too present, too heavy. I didn't touch it this time. I scooped it back into the plastic bag using gloves and shoved it in the freezer. I don't even know why I did that. Maybe I thought freezing it would sterilize it, make it less. Wrong. Maybe I just wanted it somewhere I could see it, where it couldn't move on its own. But it didn't stop the sound. That night, the singing came back louder. It wasn't just from the cabinet anymore. It seemed to seep through the walls themselves. A whispering note that rose and fell in ways that made my skin tighten. I pressed my ear to the drywall, heart hammering. The sound was clearer when I did. A voice. It wasn't speaking any language I recognized. It was low, drawn-out syllables strung together, vibrating faintly. It sounded like breath escaping through clenched teeth, like words forced out from behind gums. And every so often, the noise would break into a high-pitched whine, almost a scream, before falling back into that low, tuneless singing. I stayed there, pressed to the wall, until I realized my teeth were aching. Every single one of them. A dull throb, as though the roots were shifting deeper into my jaw. I pulled away, shaking, and refused to listen anymore. The next day, I noticed blood on my pillow. Not much, just a faint rusty stain near the edge, small enough to dismiss as maybe a nosebleed in my sleep. But when I checked the mirror, it wasn't my nose, it was my mouth. My gums were raw, swollen, faintly red at the edges. I hadn't eaten anything sharp. I hadn't injured myself. But when I pressed my tongue along my bottom row of teeth, I felt something strange. One of them was loose. It shouldn't have been. My teeth had always been fine. I'd never had dental issues beyond the occasional cavity. But there was a molar, faintly wobbly, just enough to notice when I touched it. My stomach dropped. My hand started shaking. I told myself it was just coincidence, just stress, maybe grinding my teeth in my sleep. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because that night, as I lay awake with my jaw aching, I swore I heard my own name threaded into the song. Drawn out, distorted, forced through clenched teeth. Like something inside the cabinet was trying to sing with my mouth. It all came to a head 3 nights later. I'd stuffed towels under the door to the bedroom, turned up white noise on my phone, even worn earplugs. But none of it worked. The sound was in me now, not around me. I woke around 3 a.m. with my jaw throbbing so hard I thought my skull would split. I stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the sink, staring at myself in the mirror. And then I saw it. When I pulled my lip back to check my gums, there was something caught there. Not food, not blood. Something pale, lodged against the gum line. At first, I thought it was a fragment of tooth, maybe the loose one breaking. But as I dug at it with trembling fingers, I realized it wasn't. It was something small, round, a tiny white bead with ridges. And when I finally pulled it free, gagging, I understood. It wasn't a bead. It was another tooth. A tooth growing beneath my gum line. I dropped it into the sink, shaking, unable to breathe. The tooth rattled against the porcelain, the sound sharp and mocking. And from the bedroom, muffled by the closed door, the singing started again, louder than ever. And this time, it was in harmony, like 2 voices, mine and something else. I didn't want to be in the apartment anymore. After the incident with the cabinet door opening by itself and the sound of that voice, that high, breathless song humming through my bathroom, I thought leaving for a few days would help. I convinced myself that maybe I was just exhausted, that lack of sleep had twisted my senses, that grief for my father had warped my mind enough to hear things that weren't really there. But even in that lie, a single image refused to leave me. That tooth sitting unnaturally in the cabinet. Not mine, not anyone's I knew, but lying there as though it had been waiting. I booked a cheap motel for 3 nights on the edge of town. The kind of place where the wallpaper is always peeling and the smell of cigarettes has sunk so deep into the carpet it will never leave. I didn't care. I just wanted space from the apartment. The first night in the motel, I felt better than I had in weeks. I actually slept. No faint singing drifting into my dreams. No sudden sounds of movement from the bathroom. Just silence. But the second night, at around 2:47 a.m., I checked the glowing red numbers on the alarm clock to be sure. I woke up. Not suddenly, not startled, just pulled awake, like someone had been whispering in my ear and nudged me back to consciousness. The room was heavy with the same stale motel air, but something was wrong. The sound was faint at first, so faint I thought it was just ringing in my ears. But as I sat up, straining, I knew it wasn't tinnitus. Someone was singing. It wasn't clear words, not in any language I knew. More like a tune broken into half syllables, like a child humming while trying to remember the lyrics to a song long forgotten. Except it was coming from inside the motel room. I stared at the shadows in the corners. The bathroom door stood slightly open. The space beneath the bed looked too dark. My pulse was hammering, my body frozen but vibrating with adrenaline. Then I realized the sound wasn't coming from the bed or the closet or even the bathroom. It was coming from the nightstand, more specifically from the drawer. I forced myself to move, slow and shaky, inching my hand toward the drawer handle. My hand trembled so hard that I nearly missed the pull. I yanked it open. Empty. The song stopped instantly. I sat there, chest heaving, staring into the drawer's hollow interior. The silence that followed wasn't calming. It was suffocating. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the third day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I wanted to believe that leaving my apartment had broken whatever strange spell had been over me. But if the sound had followed me here, then it wasn't the place. It was the tooth. The rational part of me hated thinking that way. It sounded insane, like something out of a ghost story told around a campfire. But deep inside, I knew that thing hadn't just appeared in my cabinet. It had been put there, or it had found its way there. And it wasn't just an object, it wanted to be heard. I went back to my apartment that evening, luggage still half-packed, heart heavy with dread. The first thing I did was go to the bathroom. The cabinet stood there innocently, as though mocking me. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. The tooth was gone. At least it looked gone. I ran my hand along the shelf, checking the corners, moving the small bottles and boxes around. Nothing. But as I closed the door, I noticed something etched faintly into the mirror. Fog, as though someone had breathed against the glass and dragged their finger through the condensation. Except there had been no steam, no shower, nothing to create it. And the words written there chill me to my core. Listen, that night I didn't leave the bathroom door open. I locked it. I tried to barricade it with a chair. It didn't matter. At 3:12 a.m., the singing began again. This time it wasn't faint. It was loud, clear, seeping through the walls like the melody itself had flesh. It was slow, dragging, like someone was savoring every note. I cover my ears with my pillow, press my palms against my skull, but the sound drilled straight into my head. When I finally dared to look, the bathroom door was wide open, and on my bed, lying neatly atop the pillow beside me, was the tooth. I don't remember screaming, but my throat was raw the next morning. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. I wrapped it in layers of tissue and dropped it into the trash bin, but when I came back hours later, it was back in the cabinet. Not resting in the corner this time, standing upright, as though balanced carefully on its root, like it had been placed there intentionally. I stayed out of the apartment the entire day. I walked the streets aimlessly, drank bitter coffee just to keep myself awake, sat in the public library until it closed. Anything to avoid going back. But exhaustion always wins. When I finally returned after midnight, I noticed something new. My neighbors were whispering about me. Mrs. Collins, the woman across the hall, leaned in close to me as I unlocked my door. "Honey," she whispered, "do you sing at night?" I froze. "No." "Why?" She looked uneasy. "Because it sounds like you do, like a little lullaby, over and over. All of us hear it, every night." I didn't know what to say. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She touched my arm gently and whispered, "Maybe you should get some help." I wanted to tell her everything. About the tooth, the singing, the words on the mirror. But as I looked into her tired eyes, I realized how it would sound. Crazy. Delusional. So I just nodded and went inside. That night I didn't sleep in the bed. I dragged a blanket and pillow to the living room couch and lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting. The song came at 2:59 a.m., but it didn't come from the bathroom this time. It came from directly beneath the couch. The voice was softer, muffled by the cushions, but it was so close I could feel the vibrations through my spine. I bolted upright, grabbed the flashlight from the side table, and aimed it under the couch. The tooth was there, wedged into the carpet fibers, vibrating faintly as though singing with its whole body. I nearly fainted. I don't know how I've lasted this long. The tooth wants something. I can feel it. It's not random. It's not meaningless. It sings like it remembers, like it's calling. But calling who? Or calling what? I tried throwing it out again. This time, I put it in a plastic bag, sealed it with duct tape, and walked 3 blocks to dump it into a dumpster behind a gas station. When I came back, it was waiting for me on the kitchen counter. And beside it, scratched into the wood, were 3 words, "Sing with me." That was last night. Now, as I write this, I hear it again. Not faint, not distant, but rising, stronger, faster, more insistent. The sound is no longer confined to the apartment. It's in my head, and I'm starting to understand the tune. It isn't random humming. It isn't a lullaby. It's a song of names. Names sung backward, twisted and broken, but recognizable if you focus. And tonight, for the first time, I heard mine. Not spoken. Sung. I woke up to the sound of humming. It wasn't coming from my phone, not from a passing car, not from the neighbors. It was low, steady, almost like a throat trying to force a tune through cracked vocal cords. The worst part wasn't the sound itself, though. It was that it was inside my apartment. I froze in bed, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But the sound swelled and dropped, like breathing disguised as music, filling the dark air of my bedroom. It was the same pitch, the same haunting vibration I'd been hearing faintly for weeks. Only this time there was no muffling wall, no distance. It was here. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway. From the angle of my bed, I could see the sliver of light from the kitchen window, casting a faint gray outline against the floor. The humming grew louder, clearer, as though the source of it was leaning closer to the hallway opening. I held my breath, not daring to move, and then it stopped. That was almost worse. I listened so hard my ears hurt. my chest burning from keeping my lungs frozen. The silence was too clean, too deliberate, like something waiting for me to respond. And then, faintly, there was the sound of wood creaking. The bathroom cabinet door. I forced myself out of bed and grabbed the nearest thing for protection, an old umbrella leaning against the wall. My legs shook as I crept down the hall, my socks whispering against the floor. The silence stretched unbearably, broken only by the occasional, soft, dragging sound. When I reached the bathroom door, it was ajar. I hadn't left it that way. The smell hit me first, damp, metallic like wet pennies and rotting plaster. My skin prickled. I nudged the door open, umbrella raised like a spear, and peered inside. The cabinet was open, wide. The small mirror above it reflected my own pale, terrified face, but the lower doors, the ones beneath the sink, the ones that had rattled faintly for days, hung open like a mouth yawning wide. And inside, in the shadowed hollow beneath the pipes, was a pale white shape. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light. But as I leaned closer, the shape glistened, and I realized with horror what it was. A tooth. Not one of mine. Not a small chipped piece. A full, human molar, yellowed and wet, sitting right there on the wood. And beside it, another, and another. I don't know how long I stared, frozen, before my brain could even process what I was looking at. There were at least half a dozen scattered across the damp wood, some smeared with a dark, tarry residue. Then the humming started again. Except this time, it wasn't behind me. It came from inside the cabinet. I dropped the umbrella, slammed the doors shut, and staggered back, choking on my own breath. I must have kicked something because the soap dispenser clattered to the floor, echoing through the apartment. The humming stopped again. That's when the whisper came. So faint, I thought I was imagining it at first. A soft, wet sound like words mouthed through water. I crouched down despite every screaming instinct in me, pressing my ear close to the cabinet. More! The voice was breathy, gurgled, not fully formed, but unmistakable. I stumbled backward, hit the wall, and scrambled to my feet. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat at the far end of the apartment, every light on, staring at the hallway as though something would crawl out of it. The next day, I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I had to. Work was impossible. I sat in meetings and heard faint humming over everyone's voices, like a background track only I could hear. My coworkers asked if I was sick. I must have looked pale, sweat beading in my temples. I went home that evening half dreading what I'd find, half needing to know. The apartment felt suffocating when I opened the door, like the air had been sealed in all day. I forced myself into the bathroom. The cabinet doors were closed. I crouched down, hands shaking, and pulled them open again. Empty. No teeth. No humming. Nothing. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. Instead, the absence made my skin crawl even more. Because I knew what I'd seen. Teeth don't just vanish. They don't crawl away on their own. That night, I locked the bathroom door from the outside. I even dragged a chair in front of it, as though the flimsy wood would stop whatever was inside. I slept in fragments, waking up every hour, ears straining. At 3:14 a.m., I sat up in bed, convinced I'd heard something, and then I realized what it was. Breathing. Not mine. It was coming from the other side of the bedroom window. Slow, wet, rattling breaths. Inhale. Exhale. A faint, gurgling wheeze in the throat, pressed against the glass just behind the curtain. I couldn't move. My entire body locked up. The sound didn't fade. It stayed there, steady, patient. When I finally snapped and yanked the curtain open, the window was empty. But on the glass, faintly fogged in condensation, was a shape. The imprint of a mouth, pressed wide, as if someone had leaned in close and breathed against it. And smeared across the fog, just beneath the lips, was something small stuck to the glass. A tooth! That was when I stopped pretending this was something I could handle alone. I called my friend Claire the next day. She's the only person who ever believed me about strange things before, the only one who wouldn't laugh this off as stress or paranoia. I didn't tell her everything. I just said something weird was happening in my apartment and asked if she'd come over. When she arrived, I felt such a rush of relief that I nearly cried. Having another person there made the silence feel less heavy. She looked around the apartment, raising an eyebrow at the chair blocking the bathroom door, but didn't say anything at first. Finally, she asked me to explain. So I told her. Not everything, not the whispers or the breathing, but enough, the humming, the teeth, the feeling of being watched. She went quiet for a long time after. Then she said something I'll never forget. You know, my grandmother used to tell me a story about something like that. Her voice was low, almost embarrassed, but there was no humor in her eyes. She told me about an old superstition from her childhood, about a spirit that lingered in cabinets and cupboards. A tooth singer, she called it, though she admitted she wasn't sure of the real name. According to her grandmother, it was a thing that collected pieces of people, teeth, nails, hair, using them to build something it was missing. I laughed nervously, but it wasn't funny, because suddenly everything clicked into place. The tooth, the voice asking for more, the humming. It wasn't just haunting me, it was collecting. And I was next. Claire stayed with me that night. We both slept, or tried to, on the couch, leaving the lights on, waiting for something to happen. At 2:47 a.m., it did. A crash shook the apartment. The bathroom. We bolted upright, and for a moment neither of us dared move. Then, gripping each other's arms, we crept down the hall. The chair I'd wedged against the bathroom door was on the floor. The door stood wide open, and the humming filled the air again, louder than ever. Claire clutched my hand so hard my bones hurt. We stood frozen as the sound grew and grew, vibrating the air, making the mirror above the sink tremble against the wall. Then abruptly it stopped. The silence was worse, and in that silence we both heard it. A voice, wet, gurgling, but clear enough this time to make out. One more. I don't know how much longer I can keep writing this. My hands won't stop shaking, my gums are bleeding again, and sometimes I swear I can feel something hard and foreign shifting beneath the skin of my jaw. But if I don't get this out, if I don't leave some record, then what's happened to me will swallow me whole, and no one will believe I ever existed. The singing hasn't stopped. It's grown louder, more coherent, and now it follows me everywhere. No matter where I hide, hotel rooms, friend apartments, even my car, it finds me. It's not muffled anymore. It's not the faint hum in the cabinet. It's crystal clear. It's inside me. The last time I opened the cabinet, the tooth wasn't there. I woke one night to the sound of the familiar, high-pitched melody, the song of the tooth. It was clearer than ever, not a hum but words, whispered in a language I couldn't understand, rhythmic and guttural, almost like chanting. I stumbled into the kitchen, sweating so badly it dripped down my spine. The cabinet door was already ajar. I didn't open it. I didn't touch it, but it was open, just wide enough for me to see the black emptiness inside. The tooth was gone. At first, I felt relief so sharp it hurt. It was over, I thought. Whatever had been living in there was finished with me. But then I heard something from deep inside that black cabinet, breathing, slow, wet, and patient, as though something had been crouched in there all along, waiting for me to notice. I slammed the door and backed away, clutching my jaw, because the moment I shut it, my teeth ached like someone was pulling them from the roots. The next day, I tried to ground myself. I shaved, showered, avoided the kitchen. I told myself I was hallucinating, sleep-deprived, stressed. But when I leaned into the mirror to rinse my face, I froze. One of my molars, the second from the back, wasn't white anymore. It was darker, grayish, with fine hairline cracks running through it. The cracks weren't random. They were lines, like the grooves carved into the singing tooth. I pressed my tongue against it, gagging at the metallic taste. And then, clear as if it were playing from a speaker in my skull, I heard the melody. But this time it was my own tooth singing. I smashed the mirror with my fist. I couldn't stand to see it. I booked an emergency dental appointment. The dentist was a middle-aged woman, calm and clinical, but the second she shined the light into my mouth, her face changed. She leaned back without saying a word. Her eyes flicked to the assistant, then back to me. "You'll need an extraction," she said quickly, too quickly. I tried to ask what she saw, but she just snapped off her gloves, muttering, "Not here. Not today." When I pressed her, she grew pale. Finally, she leaned close and whispered, "It's not one of yours." That was the last thing she said before leaving the room, refusing to come back. The assistant rescheduled me for a special procedure with a referral, but when I checked the referral slip later, the paper was blank. That night, the singing didn't come from the cabinet or my tooth. It came from everywhere. The air in my apartment vibrated with it. The windows rattled, the walls trembled. The melody was louder, richer, as though dozens of voices were harmonizing, overlapping into something that wasn't music anymore. It was a chorus of teeth, countless teeth, each voice slightly different. And through the singing came words, English this time, "Open, open, open." I clutched my mouth and screamed, but my own voice joined theirs. My jaw cracked as something shifted under the gum line. I could feel more than 30 teeth in my mouth. Too many, far too many. Some pressing sideways, some crowding the roof of my mouth, others sliding down toward my throat. I vomited blood and fragments of enamel into the sink. But when I looked up, the mirror showed no fragments, no blood. Just me, smiling back with a mouth full of wrong, jagged teeth, humming softly. I don't know how I found the article. It was like it appeared in my browser without me searching. It was about a dentist from the 1970s who went missing after claiming to have discovered parasitic dentition, teeth that could grow independent of a host, carrying memory and sound. His colleagues dismissed him as insane, but before he disappeared, he wrote one last paper. In it, he described a patient who had a single singing tooth appear in her home. It grew louder each night, until one morning her family found her dead in her bed, her jaw split open, stuffed with hundreds of new teeth. The paper said they found the tooth in her cabinet first. The article ended abruptly, like it had been cut short. Tonight, the cabinet won't stay shut. No matter how many times I close it, the door slowly creaks back open, as if pulled by invisible hands. I nailed it shut. I even push my refrigerator against it. Still, it opens. The singing is deafening now. It's not just a sound, it's pressure, vibrations in my bones. I can feel it deep in my chest, rattling against my ribs. Every surface hums with resonance. And my teeth, my God, my teeth are moving. They grind and chatter, clicking against each other even when my mouth is closed. I try to wedge a towel between them, but the towel shredded in seconds, chewed apart like paper. Every time I catch my reflection, I see another face smiling behind mine, its jaw stretching wider than it should, lips split, gums split, teeth spilling out in endless rows. It's open now. Not just the cabinet, something inside it. A hole, or a tunnel, lined with ivory ridges that shift like gums. It's breathing, exhaling warm, damp air into the kitchen. The smell is rot, saliva, blood. I can see them in there. Teeth. Mountains of them. Some human, some not. Some as long as knives. And in the darkness, something massive stirs. It's singing, but it's not the tooth anymore. It's all the teeth. Every tooth that's ever fallen, broken, pulled, lost, they're all here. They're all alive. And they're calling me by name. I know what it wants. It wants me to crawl inside. And my body, my traitorous, aching, shivering body, is moving toward it. If anyone finds this, don't go near the cabinet. Don't touch the tooth. They sing because they are hungry. And once they start singing, they won't stop until you've joined the chorus. The last thing I feel as I type this is my jaw cracking wide, wider than humanly possible, my own teeth splitting my lips as the song bursts from me. And I understand now. The tooth was never in the cabinet. It was always in me.